All right, another coach gone in Division One FBS football, and this one really comes to no surprise after what we've seen with the record, and that's South Florida. Jeff Scott is out of a job after a 4-26 record in his third season leading the Bulls. The program did come out with a statement saying, when Jeff came to Tampa in December of 2019, we had high expectations for where he could take our football program. While he did so many things right, including rebuilding our culture, I agree, pushing forward our indoor performance facility, which we'll get into in just a minute, and engaging our community, the on-the-field results fell well below our standards. He's a tremendous person and class individual. We wish him, Sarah, Savannah, Hunter, his family, the best in the future. So, yeah, I agree. I feel like he was definitely a good job building this culture. He did a good job coming over from Clemson and doing just that. He was a big part on really helping get the facilities get improved as well. Steve, I know you're going to take a little piece on that and really dig into it, but it's no surprise that he's getting fired. He really only had one big win against an FBS team, and that was against Temple. And then after he couldn't get the job done against Temple this past week, they finally gave him the can, Steve.
Irony. And I'm glad we didn't touch upon the whole thing. Is the Clemson coaching tree, is that all overblown? I'm sure it's going to come out at some point.
Oh, yeah.
During the off season. But this isn't about, what his pedigree was as an assistant in Clemson. This really was a matter of the fact that he could not match the Herculean work he did as a fundraiser. That indoor performance facility, I was looking at pictures. It is absolutely gorgeous, absolutely state of the art. University of South Florida was a commuter school for so many years, and then they get the bright idea, you know what, we're going to start a football program. And for the first 10 years of the program's existence, they really felt that they could compete with the other Florida schools in the recruiting thing, because Tampa, we're going to build this, and we're going to have a new on-campus stadium. That really didn't become a reality until Scott got to USF. And he is the driving force that's going to get that on-campus football stadium built and financed by 2027. So I think he's not going to go and get another coaching job. I think he's going to be retained because he works for the USF Foundation as well as USF's athletic department. So I think from that standpoint, he has such a rapport and such credibility in the community. And that just goes to show you that with the horrible on-field performance, I don't think anybody really, and the athletic director and maybe some boosters, really gave much thought to Scott moving on. The other thing that happened was the emergence of UCF. An hour and 20 minutes on I-4. They became a national force for several years. They declared themselves national champions. Well, that's fine. Okay, that's good PR and it's good for local media. But still, UCF's going to the Big 12. South Florida is just treading water, and that's just not good enough in the end.
When you look at this first, I don't know if I feel like he'll be retained. I feel like if he was going to be, they would have made that statement during his firing that we still want him a part of this program. So I'm a little skeptical on that one. But you just brought up, basically their rival, if you will, in UCF and them going to the other division. You speak of possible potential candidates. Well, the former coach of UCF is now a free agent, if you will, the one who, claimed that national champion, now former Nebraska head coach, and now, Scott Frost. Is there an opportunity that we could see him back in Florida coaching that football team? I think there's a couple former Florida coaches that names could pop up. Urban Meyer, former Florida coach, former Miami coach Manny Diaz, who's now defensive coordinator of Penn State. There's a few that can really, I mean, former Florida coach Dan Mullen. There's a lot of them out there that could, in my mind, pick up this coaching job. I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to love to have former South Florida coach back as well. Jim Leavitt, they'd love to have him back as well. I mean, he brought the team to the best that they possibly could. So I think there's a lot of interesting candidates that could take this job. I think it's actually a pretty impressive job. I think that people will be attracted to it, even though that they'll have a lot of work to do based on the performance on the field. But we've seen all the stuff that's happened off the field and all the additions and the gritting of the facilities, and that's a big win in itself. You get a big time coach, down there who already knows the recruiting trail in the state of Florida. You could find yourself right back in the mix of things pretty quick, Steve.
Yeah, Diaz popped in my head. That was the first name that popped into my head. If you're an anything coach at Penn State, I think that buys you instant credibility, for a program. I wonder, though, if they're not going to try to go with the younger guy. It would not surprise me if they focus their hiring on a minority candidate. I think that would do more as far as keeping in-state. They're not going to out-recruit Miami or Florida State, but there are plenty of really, really good Division I football players that come out of Florida. So I think if they went the minority candidate route, I think that would help them recruit in a lot of the urban areas of Florida. So it'll be interesting to see. USF now has to get it right. They can't play around. They have to get it right. They have to get somebody in there that's going to get immediate impact talent through the transfer portal. Right now, I don't know anybody. There'll be people wanting to transfer out of UCF, but as far as players wanting to come in, I think it's all going to hinge on that hire. And the reason I mentioned him being retained for the USF Foundation, it is part of the university, but it is not part of the athletic department. And the Orlando Sentinel had just a brief little paragraph in their story that it seemed apparent that he would still be involved in the design and the financing of the stadium there on campus. So that's where that came from. But you make a good point. I mean, if you don't want him around as your coach, why do you want to keep him around? But money talks.
Oh, for sure.
And he has been. I would be shocked if there are other coaches that are not named Nick Saban or other guys, Dabo Sweeney, that have raised that kind of money for their university. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars, and he was out there going to Chamber of Commerce's and talking to booster clubs and just being out in the community, and that's what drew those finances. I think the people in the Tampa Bay region really do want USC. They really, really do.
Speaking of Dabo Sweeney, we have seen that Clemson team struggle offensively. Could we see a reunion back with Scott Dabo Sweeney back at Clemson?
Ooh, that's really interesting.
He did a very good job with Trevor Lawrence in that offense. Before he took that head coaching job. I mean, there's a reason he was a candidate to take the head coaching job. Clemson's struggling a little bit offensively. We could see a reunion in the future, Steve.
I didn't even give it, honestly, I never even gave it a thought. Because how many coaches doesn't Clemson have? Like 50 coaches, it seems like. I swear to God, they're so specialized that they have all these coaches and everybody wants to hire them. But boy, that would be a huge gain for Clemson to get.
You see it happen all the time with Alabama. When a coach gets fired, they find their way onto Nick Saban's coaching squad. Who says that once Scott gets fired, he doesn't find a way back with Dabo? Wouldn't be surprised if in the offseason we see, even if it's not as offensive coordinator, but maybe as a associate head coach or assistant to the head coach or something like that along those lines, maybe with a special title. Wouldn't be surprised to see that back there. Very interesting.
Yep.
And again,
Yep.
might I add one last thing? Yeah, you said the USF right there. What UCF, if the former coach Scott Frost, imagine how juicy that would be if he was hired there, their in-state rival. Pretty juicy one. I think that would be a pretty crazy way to end it. I know you said it might be a minority pick, which would be cool, would be great. Honestly, I think that would be a nice step in the right path for recruiting. I think you're absolutely right. But could you imagine a guy like Scott Frost, who did really well in the AAC, just couldn't get it done in Power 5? He gets a chance right back down in the American again. I could see him finding a way to succeed. He could resurrect that team.